So now let's go ahead and take a look at exactly what you're going to do in this first week of practices. So let's scroll down, get right to where it says week number 1 assignment. I would click on it and then you could see it in a little bit more detail here. So this first one is basically like a prerequisite. I wouldn't wait until tomorrow to do this. I would knock it out today and make sure you're ready for success as soon as tomorrow. And we're going to make sure that you download Bluebook. Now, depending on what kind of computer you're using, if it's a PC like myself, you'll click here and you'll be able to download the Bluebook app from there. If, however, instead you have a Mac, you'll click here and download it from the App Store. I will say it does have a bit of a concerning 1.5 star rating, so hopefully you have a PC. Now, not to get ahead of ourselves, but when eventually you do finish taking the practice test, and that's not until the end of day 4, but then we'll be able to review your scores here. Notice you'll be required to log in just as always. I'll also have that link saved for you in day 5 when you actually are going to use it, so no need to save it from here. Once you've downloaded Bluebook, I personally would recommend to make it as easy as possible. So notice down here, once you've had it opened up, I would right click and I would choose pin to taskbar. I've already pinned it, so instead for me it says unpin from taskbar. You want to pin it so that way it's really easy to access it when you're ready to do your practices. So you're going to go ahead and log in using your College Board account, which you should have at this point. You want to make sure that if you forgot your password, you recover it accordingly. You'll go ahead, type in your credentials, put in your password. So like I said, I would recommend that you have everything set up on Bluebook today after this class so that you're ready to go for tomorrow on day 1. Now, I know at this point you're probably reaching information overload. So let me interject one thing here, as we're always trying to update our materials to make it as clear as possible. So everything you saw in the overview video for the beginning of class was really focused on what you'll be doing primarily in future weeks. So we sometimes get parents or students who reach out to us after the first class and ask us, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do for the first week homework. So keep in mind, we have the week number 1 assignment overview right here under week number 1 assignment. So if you forget anything in this 15-minute video, you can rewatch it here. And to make things even easier for each component, for example, today's Bluebook download / setup process, if you click on that specific portion, you'll see that part of this video that you're currently watching so that you know exactly what to do today. And I did the same thing for days 1 through 5, which we'll be talking about momentarily. So if day 3 comes around and you're kind of forgetting what to do, click there and you'll be able to watch that specific short portion of this current video. And we updated the thumbnails to make it a little bit clearer that it says days 1 through 5. Now let's discuss what you're going to do each day of this upcoming week, one day at a time. All you're going to do for tomorrow is day 1, which is reading and writing, module 1. So remember, there's 2 modules for the reading, 2 modules for the math. Notice how we're going to have it broken up, where each day you're just going to do 1 module. It's going to take 32 minutes for days 1 and 2, and 35 minutes for days 3 and 4 when you're doing math. Let's go ahead and look at each of these. And all I have there are just simple instructions. You log into Bluebook. Now the link that I have there goes to the PC version, but obviously if you instead have the one for Mac, you would go there. And like I said, I would definitely pin it to the taskbar. So instead of having to even click here to download and do all that, you would have already had it downloaded. You just go down here, log in accordingly, and complete section 1, module 1. Now you don't want to move on to section 2, and I'll show you how to avoid doing that and to make sure you can still resume the test right where you left off at the end of day 1. So what you're going to do is click on full length practice, and then under test type, you're going to click on SAT. Now at the time of this recording, there's no longer practice test 1 through 3. So even though we're calling this practice test number 1, it's just really the first practice test of 4 that you're going to complete during your time with us. Now, the one way that you could technically get out of having to do days 1 through 4 of this first week of assignments is by submitting a practice test from Bluebook that you completed within the last 3 months or a PSAT score. Again, assuming it's from within the last 3 months. Otherwise, we'd want you to take a Bluebook practice test because we want an accurate baseline of where you're currently at. So let's say I choose practice test 4 as my first practice test. And then in my case, I had shown another student how to start the test. So it says the test is in progress. I'm going to choose start over. However, eventually when you actually are in day 2, 3, or 4, if that option comes up, you'll definitely want to say resume wherever you left off. So let's go ahead and click next. And then you'll click next again, and then you're ready to go. Notice we'll press close after we've read the instructions, and you could hide the timer. I wouldn't recommend that. We definitely want to know how much time we have. And then let's talk about some of the features that I would recommend utilizing. For example, I'm a big fan of zooming in so that it makes it a little bit easier to see. For whatever reason, for me, whenever the text is really small, it almost seems like it's more difficult. So if I press Control plus, holding the control but pressing plus as many times as I want, it makes it almost feel like it's an elementary book, right? And when it's bigger font, it feels like it might be a little bit easier and less intimidating, but also it's easier to read. And then you can always hold Control and press minus as many times as you want. And if you hold Control and press 0, it goes back to its default setting. Another feature that I really like is if you click this ABC here, that gives you the ability to cross out the options so that by process of elimination, you could figure out what you think the answer is. Obviously, I'm not reading this question. I'm just showing you the features here. Now, also a feature that honestly I'm not a huge fan of is the highlight one. I would personally much rather just make any notes on my scrap piece of paper that I'm provided by the proctor. Let's say if you wanted to highlight a couple words, click annotate, and then you could type something about it, whatever note you would want to make about it, and then you could hover over it and it's there. I don't really see a bunch of use case scenarios for that, but it is there at your disposal. If at any time you ever forget the directions, which are pretty straightforward, you could always click there to see the directions, and then in more, you have some other options. I wouldn't get too hung up on all the different shortcuts that are available because it could be quite overwhelming. For me, zooming in, zooming out, those are the main ones. Eliminating the answer options that I think it's definitely not. I think that's key. And then also flagging for review. So if you get stuck on a question, you could choose to, let's say, guess or just mark it for review. And that way, when you get to the end, when you click on this bottom part here, it shows which questions have been flagged for your review, and you could easily go to them and then go back here, go to any other question that you'd like. Now, let's say you got to the end of this first module. So number 27, let's say I went back to any of the ones that I had previously flagged. I now feel comfortable with them, so I unflag them. And then I've gotten through all 27 questions. And I'm gonna go ahead and press next. So keep in mind, I only want you to do module 1 on day 1. So you're gonna press close and you're gonna just exit out. I know it might be a little bit scary, like, oh, is my work saved? Don't worry, it is. And I'll show you what you're gonna do now on day 2. So let's go back to week number 1 assignment. We'll go to day 2. We know that we're gonna resume with section 1, module 2 for the reading and writing. So on day 2, you'll go ahead back to Blue Book. You'll log in with your credentials as always. And then notice down here, it says SAT Practice 1 in progress. The fastest way to get to it, just click resume. And then notice we're in module 2. So there we go. So you'll do this on day 2. When you've completed it, you'll press next and they'll say the module's over. And then at that point, they're gonna give you the 10-minute break that you would actually get on the real SAT. Since we're just doing this in parts where we're doing it spread out over 4 days, at this point, again, you could just press the X. And then now we're on to day 3. So on day 3, we're gonna complete the first module for the math, and you'll log into Blue Book like always, log in, resume test, and then I would just go to resume testing because you would already taken a 24-hour break at that point. So it tells you some of the main information that you need to be aware of as far as how you're able to grid in for the student-produced responses. So you definitely wanna look over that. And then notice I have it pretty zoomed in, so I'm gonna do Control minus so I can see everything and get it to the kind of viewing window that I like. So you'll go through, you'll complete all the questions. Notice similar features that I like include zooming in, zooming out, eliminating the options that I don't think it is. Definitely write on your scrap paper as much as you want because you will be permitted to use it. They'll provide it to you. Notice you have the Desmos calculator. I'm not a huge fan of that, especially because we're gonna utilize our 25 graphing calculator programs, but you do have that at your disposal and you can use your own graphing calculator. For references, this is good to know that you have it available to you as one of the features. And then you have the same 4 things under more. If ever you forget some of the directions, you could click up here in case you're unclear on how many characters you can have based on the fact that you could have a negative as well. Same idea as far as being able to flag questions for review. And I will point out that it's a really good thing to know that you can do up to 5 characters for a positive answer. So you could do 5 characters. If it's negative, you could do 6, but the negative counts as 1. So it's really still like 5 digits, but just a negative sign in front of it. If you had an answer, let's say like 3.5, there's no way to actually put 3.5 exactly like that because it'll instead look like 31 halves. So instead you make it an improper fraction instead of that mixed number. So 7 halves is acceptable. And then you could also do the decimal equivalent of 3.5, 3.50. You could even continue at 3.500 as long as you're only taking up 5 spaces. Now we're on to day 4. You click here on day 4, module 1. And as always, I have the link to Blue Book to download it, but at this point you would have already pinned it to your taskbar. And then once you're logged in, you'll go ahead and resume the practice test 1 on module 2 for the math. Now, once you finish this module, you'll officially have finished practice test 1. And notice it's grading the actual test at this point. So it says view your score, and it gives you this website, mypractice.cb.org. So go ahead and click view your score, and then you'll log into your account as always. Now, I've saved my username and password to make it really easy. I would recommend doing the same. Now, notice I've done this a couple times, and obviously I'm just putting nothing, so I got 400s on those ones, but you would see your actual score loaded up there. So now we're on to day 5. So let's go ahead and look at exactly what you're expected to do. Notice step 1. one, you're gonna review all the questions you got incorrect, simply to start recognizing which themes you struggled with the most so that you can pay extra attention when we actually cover that theme. It's not necessarily to go super in depth or take too much time. And if you want, you could start looking at the explanations of how to solve them. I wouldn't take more than about 10 minutes to do that. So let's look at how we would do it. So when we click here on review practice test number 1, I give you the link to go right to your test results. If you're already logged in, it'll be easy, but obviously if not, you'll just have to log in at first. I'm gonna go to one that's a little bit more realistic. I'll go to this one instead of the one that I got a 400 on. And then you can look at the different domains of questions, which we already discussed in the program overview video. Now the goal here is to look at the 4 domains for reading and writing, the 4 domains for math, kind of get a feel of which particular domains you're doing really well in and which ones you're struggling in. Notice it even says the difficulty level, with the goal obviously being that you're getting to the point where they're giving you all the level hard questions because you're just excelling that much on the test. Now something that is interesting is notice for the math, I have all full bars. However, I did, if you go to the math section, end up getting 1 question incorrect. However, that still produced a perfect score in the math section. And you can also recall from the program overview video that if we look at the table of contents, we can compare which domains we're doing really well in versus which ones we're struggling in. So that way, when we do cover those in class, you pay special attention knowing that it's something you need to improve on. Now here we see all the questions in their entirety. I think that could be a little overwhelming. So let's go section by section, reading and writing first. We'll go down here and you can see which ones you got correct versus incorrect. You can go ahead and click here to go to the next page, and you're gonna try to find the ones that you got incorrect. Click on review and look at the answer explanation to see why it is what it is and why it's not what you put. Sometimes the description will give you an idea of what theme it is. For example, here it mentions coordinating main clauses, which likely means that we're dealing with linking clauses. However, it would be much nicer if College Board outright said what that theme was, or even what domain it came from. Then once we X out of there, we can go ahead and continue this process, look for any questions we got incorrect with the same goal of just understanding the rationale, starting to kind of tuck it away in your mind. We'll get out of there and then we can finish it out for any remaining ones. And then we'll do the same thing for math. We'll go ahead and look through. And in this case, like I said, I only got 1 wrong, but I still got a perfect score. Just depends on the level of difficulty of the test. Now, as you can see, the explanation for this question is pretty intense and difficult to understand by just reading through it, which is exactly why for all 462 math questions that you're going to complete over your 10 weeks with us, I provide you with worked out solution videos for every single one. The second thing you're going to do on day 5 is watch the video on how to fill out your goal tracking sheet and fill out yours at the same time. So let's go ahead and look at step 2 here. And it's really important that you'll watch the video that's located above in this specific section, and then follow my steps for figuring out your weekly and big picture goals. And in that video, I reference a specific website. Here's the link to that conversion website. Now we're on to step 3, where you're going to transfer all 23 graphing calculator programs if you didn't have them transferred in person. Of course, if you're attending live at our office at Teagan in Rochester, then you'll have had them transferred to your own calculator unless you didn't have your own calculator. In that case, or if you're attending via Zoom, you'll want to make sure you have your graphing calculator purchased by either Tuesday or Wednesday of the upcoming week when you're completing day 5 of week 1, so that you can very easily transfer them on your own. So let's go ahead and click here. And in this 4-minute video, I walk you through exactly how to transfer the programs. Now in the video, I reference 18 graphing calculator programs. Don't worry, we do have all 23 there, as we've added 5 more graphing calculator programs for you. Now we're on to step 4 of day 5. So you're gonna watch the graphing calculator programs tutorial video, and this part's really important, follow along on your own graphing calculator. So this is a 25-minute video right here, and I can't emphasize enough how important this is, since the math section is worth 50% of your composite score, and you get to use these graphing calculator programs. Knowing how and when to use each one is going to be so critical for avoiding silly errors and saving time so that you can reallocate to the more challenging questions. Now, something that's good to know, if ever your graphing calculator gets cleared by accident, you could always go back and transfer them since you have lifetime access to our platform. But after this video, our facilitator is going to show you this 2.5-minute video about how to archive the programs to prevent the proctor from accidentally clearing them. And even though you're really only assigned to watch this 25-minute video on day 5 of week 1, in future math practice weeks on day 5, when I say go through the entire calculator sheet while practicing on your own for 10 minutes, I'd really recommend watching that 25-minute video until it becomes second nature. So now we're on to step 5, where you're gonna submit the graphing calculator program of the week. So let's click here. And as you can see by the name, we're gonna give you a program of the week every single week to test you on whether you can recognize which program could be used in a real SAT question. So you look at the question, determine which program you can use, and I recommend you actually try the question out and see if you can implement the program. And when we scroll down, we can see a few things to note. First, you're just gonna type your answer below after you press Start Assignment, and you're gonna put the same answer in your reflections section of your goal tracking sheet under Program of the Week. And then third, there's no need to upload any documents for this homework. So let's go ahead and click Start Assignment, and you'll type in whichever program you think is the correct one that you could use on this question. Now, I'm not gonna give you the correct answer. I just wanna put something in. So hint, out of the 23 programs, Radical is actually not the correct program for this one. So you gotta decide which of the 22 is the correct one. We're not gonna upload anything. We just click Submit, and then you'll see toward the top the correct answer of which program it was. We'll go ahead and click View More, and you have a hyperlink to see how I worked out that problem using this program. And notice it's just 1.5 minutes long. These videos are intended to be very short because of the fact that the graphing calculator programs do save you a ton of time. Now, I've mentioned it before, but it's really important that once you've completed it, you go ahead and click Mark as Complete so that you don't get that email from us saying that you didn't complete your homework. And once you do so, you'll see this encouraging message pushing you along to the 6th and final step. And now we're on to step 6, where you're gonna submit your homework by midnight the day before your next class. Now, because there's quite a bit involved in what you're gonna submit, as well as the technology pieces involved, we're gonna wait to talk about this in detail until the day before you're gonna be submitting everything. And we're gonna send you and your parent an email with all the details of exactly what to expect. You can also get all the information right here under Day 5 Overview, which is just under a 14-minute video showing you every single component of what you're doing in Day 5. Now, we know we're cutting it close on time and it's pretty much at information overload, but just stay with me for a couple more minutes when your facilitator is gonna go ahead and show you under Graphing Calculator Programs Tutorial, this very important short video about how to archive your programs. You may wanna try to do it in real time, so it'll be like second nature come test time. And remember, you got this.